We're actually live on YouTube. We're live on Facebook, and we're live on Twitter for the first time. I didn't even know they hooked up to Twitter, and we're with Patty Greer and Alfred Laurent Weber. Chris Burres sends its regards. And the title of the show is How C60 EVO ESS 60 helps us do wonders and stay safe in these times. And let me tell you, I think that 7 billion people around the planet, at least once a week, if not more, say, how can I stay safe, right?
Yeah, that's the question of the day.
Yeah. Now, there were a couple of videos that were made by questions that have been raised here and there. So let's we have these, and through the magic of technology, we can share.
Let me do a little explanation before.
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
So C60 EVO is owned by 3 people. Myself and the 2 guys that own SES Research, which is the lab that's been making C60 for 30 years. They supply the products for the 2012 Paris Bhakti study, which is the famous test where the Wistar rats lived 90% longer with our formulation, and they died with no tumors, which I think was the first time in history, as well as the longest successful longevity test on lab animals in history. 90% was, we hold a record. And carbon-60, the molecule, also received the Nobel Prize in 1996. And it's made in the lab, our lab, for 30 years, by heating graphite rods to the temperature of the sun. And Chris and Robert invented this Star Wars, to me, looking machine that they're still using today. They've upgraded, but it's still the same technology that these 2 guys invented in college. So Robert is always in the lab. You guys don't usually see him, but we started getting questions about the graphene oxide that may or may not be in the thing in the arm. And if that is causing issues in people, people are starting to say, well, wait a minute, what about C60? So rumors started moving that C60 and nanomaterial and bots and, it's toxic and they're going to hook AI up to C60. Chris and Robert have explained it to me. And so I finally brought Chris and Robert both into the studio, and we recorded the answers to these questions with Robert, who you'll rarely see on camera. But I think it's really important talking about graphene. And when he explained it to me, it was like, oh my God, that I understand. So that's the first video we're going to see is Robert telling us about the graphene oxide, the answer to people's fears. And the answer is no, it's not related to C60 at all. C60 that's made in our lab is the only thing we can refer to. So these 2 videos are my 2 partners. I'm just doing a brief, hosting, but it's answers that I think people want to hear. So thank you for sharing them, Alfred. Here we go.
Oh yeah, totally. So let's share the first one, and here we're coming. And so we'll bring this down here, and we'll put this in there.
My name is Patty Roach. I'm one of the proud owners of C60 EVO, the evolution of the carbon-60 molecule to ESS60, pure C60. I'm very proud today to introduce my partners, Chris Burres.
Hello.
Who's well known on all the shows that we do, but our secret weapon hiding behind the veil is Robert Wong, who's going to explain the science that people have been asking questions about. With the rollout of all these shots in the arm, a lot of people are very concerned that there's graphene oxide. And we've been hearing in the comments on a lot of the shows that Chris and I do that people are hoping that there's no relation between the great C60 miracle molecule formulation and graphene oxide that may or may not be in these shots. So Robert had a great explanation, and I think that he can really explain it in a way that we can all understand. Robert, is there any correlation between ESS 60, pure C60, and graphene oxide?
Well, thanks for having me, Patty. Well, there's really no correlation, but the only correlation you could say there is carbon. Both are made out of carbon, but totally different structures. So as everybody knows or seen in our previous videos, that carbon 60 is a round three-dimensional molecule, and graphene is one monolayer of carbon. You have many carbon chains in it, but it's one thin little sheet, kind of like a sheet of paper. You look at a sheet of paper, imagine this is one layer of graphene, and this is the ball. I mean, there's no comparison there. One little layer of sheet. You know, the closest comparison you can have for graphene is to graphite. Graphite is multiple layers of a lattice of graphene carbon. So it's more like a reading paper, or multiple sheets of paper, and that makes up a graphite. And so that's probably the closest cousin in the carbon chains that you could say graphene and graphite is related to. Maybe go back a little bit there. So maybe Chris had discussed in the past, there's 5 forms of carbon that's known to man: diamond, graphite, graphene, carbon fullerenes, and nanotubes. They're all made out of carbon. They all have different structures, and it's the only commonality they have is carbon. So, is there graphene oxides in the COVID-19 shots? Maybe, maybe not. But the question is, everybody's asking is carbon 60 in the shot? This carbon 60, people are afraid of carbon 60 because it's a nanomaterial. Well, both are nanomaterials, but it's 2 different form or structure of carbon, a ball and one sheet. So,
now, why is one toxic and the other one isn't?
Well, toxicity depends on how you look at it. I kind of use an analogy. If you look at graphene, it's one little thin sheet. So here's a thin sheet, a plastic bag. So I read some studies where they did some studies with blood cells, and graphene harmed the blood cells. Imagine you get a sheet of plastic bag and wrap it over a blood cell. Now you're choking it, you're wrapping it, you're covering it up. Versus a buckyball carbon 60, you can't cover up the blood cell. It's going to be on top of it rolling around. So.
And there's nothing toxic in carbon 60.
No, we have done tests. We have done some toxicological tests, and we'll also continue with that. Our next phase of toxicological tests, and everything proves or points to being not harmful. The pure C60 in our olive oil. And so, the toxicological, there's not much toxicological data on graphene. We don't really follow that much because we're not in the research or the realm of graphenes. We had the opportunity about 10 years ago to manufacture graphene, but we made a conscious decision not to go that route because there's too many competition out there, too many variables in the graphene production. And so we want to stick to what we know, which is the carbon 60.
Which people are loving. Chris, any thoughts on this?
No, I think that Robert gives great examples of, the difference between graphene, and that's just graphene and really the ESS60 molecule, that being the C60 molecule safe for human consumption. And didn't actually talk about the fact that there's oxides, there's oxygens and OHs on the surface of that sheet of paper, and there isn't any on the surface of the ESS60 molecule. So it's multiple components, but fundamentally, structurally, there is no similarity between an ESS60 molecule and graphene. So you really don't have anything to worry about. Research is, and the data is still out on graphene oxide. The data is in and continuing to show that ESS60 is safe for human consumption.
So there.
Right. There you go. Well, that is very interesting. And yeah, do you think we should play the other video now, or?
Yeah, I think they're kind of all in line with things people worry about because they don't have the information. And Chris is a scientist. He, of course, is always at the lab, but he is more on, he's on so many levels, so he's not always in the lab. So these questions didn't make it in deep. So when I asked Robert, and he had such solid answers, different than Chris's perception, I thought it would be really good to share the concerns that people are having. So this next one is about the AI. People are thinking, oh, nano, just the word nano for C60, these little mini molecules. And they're smaller than, they're so small that they can get into places vitamin C can't. And it's claimed after testing that the C60 molecule that we make is more than 172 times more powerful than vitamin C as an antioxidant. So it is a really strong immunity boost, and at a time like this, pretty darn important. But when people hear the word nano, they go, oh my God, bots, AI, C60 is the enemy. And so they started spreading some pretty interesting questions online. And I was like, Chris, come on, answer. But Robert, again, took it a little further. So that's what this next video is. And I think it's good for people to understand that there's no correlation and that the fear can go away. And I can only say that from our lab. I'm not talking about C60 in industrial forms or who knows what coming from other labs. So this is an interesting video too.
Great. Let me let me get that one online here. So we're just.
And actually, I learned so much from watching that one again that I think I'd like you to run all three. So.
Yeah. Let me just queue up to this.
It just answered
video here.
So many questions, even that I had.
Okay, so here we go with this next video. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Patty Greer, one of the proud owners of C60 EVO, the evolution of the carbon-60 molecule. I would like to introduce my fabulous partners, Chris Burres.
Hello.
And Robert Wong, who we hide in the lab most of the time. What we want to do is clarify some terminology that people are confused with, such as myself. That's why we have Robert and Chris here. People are concerned with C60 because they don't understand a molecule specifically going in the body to do improvements is a word we can use. What people are worried about is the word nano. It's like, what does that mean? A bot, some kind of AI connection? And C60 has nothing to do with that. We are innocent of all charges. People are concerned about nanotubes, like, what does that mean? And I can't answer it, but these guys can. So if you would clarify to start with those two terms and other things you have heard that people are scared about with C60. That would be great.
Absolutely. So, Robert, we did a couple videos, and Robert was talking about the production process for carbon 60 and ultimately ESS 60, that carbon 60 that's safe for human consumption. So go back and check out those videos. And the concern is, yeah, hey, maybe it's it's a bot that can be put in your body, or maybe it's some sort of communication device that can be put in your body. And what's really important to understand is that ESS 60 is made of 60 carbon atoms, the fundamental building block of all matter, 60 of them, just 60 carbon atoms. And currently across the globe, scientists get really excited when they can move one atom from one place to another. And so they'll move an atom and they'll write out the name, like IBM is one of them, where they've spelled out IBM in atoms. And this is an incredibly big deal because we have a very hard time moving individual atoms. In the case of ESS 60, it's only 60 carbon atoms. You really can't do anything with 60 carbon atoms. You certainly can't make a bot. There's no way to have some sort of communication through a 60 carbon atom molecule. So it's really, you're dealing in a land that okay, great. It looks, because it looks like a soccer ball molecule, it looks like it could do something, but really all it can do is kind of what we believe is it can interact with your body and do beneficial things. What it cannot do is be some sort of antenna or be some sort of robot.
Fear, fear, fear. And what are nanotubes? They have nothing to do with C60, right?
Nanotubes was discovered by accident when they were making carbon fullerenes with graphite rods, and I guess 1992, 1993, Dr. Ojima of NEC in Japan discovered some amorphous carbon that had nanotubes in it, and he went crazy about this, and he presented at one of the conferences. But what carbon nanotube is a little bitty nano-sized tube, a straw of carbon. If you take a graphite sheet and you roll this graphite sheet into a tube, that will be a nanotube. And there's multiple different kind of nanotubes, multi-wall, single-wall nanotubes, different chiralities. I think I just said it wrong, but all different properties of nanotubes. And there's a whole science in nanotubes. So there are departments who all they do is study nanotubes. And there's a lot of interesting things with nanotubes. We do sell nanotubes. We don't sell too much nanotubes because there's a lot of specialized companies that manufacture nanotubes and sell it. So we want to focus on our carbon 60, our ES60. So that's what we focus on.
And to just be aware of the difference between ESS 60, the spherical carbon molecule, and nanotubes, I can just flat out say I would not consume nanotubes in any shape or form. There is no research on them, on efficacy or if they're safe or whatever they may do. So don't do that. I will also throw in, don't consume nano onions. There are companies that we're aware out there selling nano onions. So that's basically an ESS 60 molecule, except it's got multiple larger molecules around it, and those molecules are cut in half, and so you see these layers of a bucky material. There's no research on those. Incredibly dangerous to be putting those things in your body, as opposed to ESS 60, which has lots of research showing how safe it is.
Years ago, I remember the EPA or some government entity came to visit us at one point, and I was asking questions about nanotubes, and because nanotubes can be something very similar to asbestos because it's little miniature fibers, microfibers. So they came and asked us questions, and we basically told them, we don't really work with nanotubes. If we did, we could help you out, but your visit to us was in vain because we don't work in carbon nanotube field that much.
So the beginning of the two of you working together, you were in college, and your college professor let you know that C60 is more valuable than gold per ounce. How did you guys go from learning that to creating the Star Wars machine that I saw at the lab?
That's a good question. So going back a year, so I worked at the Texas Center for Superconductivity, and my professor wanted us to professor wanted to get his hands on carbon-60, and at that time, the really only place to get carbon-60 was from Rice University, where it was discovered at, and so he sent us over there to talk to Richard Smalley. Richard Smalley told us to talk to his grad students. So we ended up talking to his grad students on about carbon-60. We ended up purchasing some of the carbon-60 from their lab.
By the way, just to jump in here, Richard Smalley is one of the guys who won the Nobel Prize for discovering buckyballs.
Yep. So, but anyhow, so to make a long story short, I was processing the raw fullerene materials due to chromatography separation, and at some point I thought, wait, 1 gram sold for $6,000, and I was like, I know how to do this and how to make it. And so I started formulating plans to build a business off this. And a few days later, our professor at the University of Houston came and talked to us. Hey, a couple of young guys, like, you start a business. I go, okay. So he gave us our full support and backing. And early on, they wanted us to be on campus. So we wrote our business plan with help at the university, at the physics department, and we presented it to the University of Houston Board of Regents, and they decided that they don't want a independent commercial business on campus, which worked out best for us. I'm sure after the first explosion, they probably would kick us out anyhow. But so off we went. Me and Chris designed our first reactor. I built it in my dad's garage, and built it, and we transported it to our first facility, and plugged it up, and it was like Frankenstein. It had sparks flying and things going all different directions, and we didn't know what we were doing at first. A couple of young guys straight out of college, but over the years we figured out how to do it and do it right and grow the business. And now we here helping people around the world with their health. And we have started business as a feedstock supplier of carbon fullerenes to other people who do research and manufacture, and now we're here on the way and the other end dealing with individual people and changing their lives for the better. And it's really fulfilling for us in that sense. We never thought we'd be in this field, but things change.
And I'm going to add, because we've visited lots of manufacturing facilities around the world, that reactor that Robert and I built in those early days is still the most efficient reactor on the planet.
Wow. And what was your part? Were you a mechanical engineer?
Yeah, I was studying mechanical engineering. Robert and I were in the same physics class together, and he really approached me. He didn't mention this and appreciate it. He actually had a different business partner when he started, and they needed some help with drawings. They needed some help with like labor and all that good stuff. And so they kind of brought me on. I was supposed to do some drawings and kind of go away. The other business partner, good friend of ours, we still know him, speak with him. He went on to do different things, and I stuck around, and Robert and I have been working together for more than 30 years now.
And then the wild girl showed up and said, let's do this. Well, I think that it's been the magical trio for sure. And we are servicing so many people in so many countries now with this amazing product. And, I just came onto it because I was in pain, a lot of pain, and it has changed my life. So when I went looking to invest in where do I want to make C60, who can I do this with? Lucky me, I'm with the original guys that invented the reactor 30 years ago, which is still the best reactor in the world. So thank you, Chris. Thank you, Robert. And everybody that's interested, you definitely want to give this a try. Even a small 4-ounce bottle to begin. You might be surprised at how much better you can feel and sleep. Our website is C60 EVO, like evolution, C60EVO.com. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Okay, well,
It's fun. That was fun. What I want to say about that is when I watch it, I forget that, we recorded a week or so ago, and I forget what they said, but I kind of remember the concept of how different, people's fears are from what we're doing. But as I'm looking at the guys, for me, the proof is in the pudding. I see their complexion. Chris is in his 50s, Rob is too, early 50s, but both of them have skin like butter. And somebody asked me recently, I did a show with Michael Jaco, and they said, can you send a photo? And I was like, oh gosh, I don't really have anything recent. So I went through the last couple of years of photos, promo, and I'm looking at my skin today, and I'm looking at these photos before I came up with this facial serum that the company sells. And I have been to the skin doctor, and she's done, what do you call it? Freezing of the brown spots, and then they come back out, and you freeze it again. Anyway, all of a sudden, I'm looking at my skin like I look completely different also than before I was taking the product and putting it on my face. We started because, when you have a bottle, even though it's more valuable than gold, when you mix it with oil, you don't have to use quite so much. But this is $95.77 if you do it on a monthly subscription. If you don't love it, you can cancel at any time, but 20% off monthly subscriptions. So being that valuable, I would always wipe it, before I put the cap on, or wipe it off the spoon, rub it, put it on my face. And I started noticing oh my gosh, that's so, I called the guys at the lab and I said, can I invent a facial serum? I've got these friends that are great formulators. And a month later, maybe two, we came up with the C60 EVO Advanced Facial Serum. And oh my God, it's so great. Revive, replenish, rejuvenate. Loving. My camera is backwards, so it's really hard. There we go. Okay, I'm on my face though. Anyway, the facial serum is selling like unbelievably because everybody that puts it on notices usually within a day or two. It's like, oh my God, I'm so soft and it doesn't go away. And so pretty wonderful. But I'm looking at Chris on these videos and just going, my God, his skin looks younger than when I met him 2 years ago. And I hear him on the shows that we do, and he says things like, well, obviously, I'm not a facial serum guy, but now I'm a facial serum guy. And Robert, I'm looking at him, and he's also like butter skin. And mine is so much better than it was in all those photos I was digging through that I realize now, wow, this stuff really works. So the third video that I'd love for you to run.
sure.
But if you haven't, do you have any comments? Did you find anything like new information?
Well, as it turns out, I did a very interesting 2-hour plus panel yesterday with three, I would call them healers, one sort of a spiritual person, one a person that was being targeted by scalar weapons near Nelson, BC, here in British Columbia, and then another person who is a nurse. There's a World War III going on out there under the guise of the pandemic. I mean, it is terrible what's going on. And so they, in the course of mentioning all of this, the just in a sentence or two, under the category of nano, the 360 came up. And so I'm very glad to have these videos that show that it's not part of it, because there is an urban legend out there. Because to be quite frank, C60 EVO ESS is my civil defense in the pandemic. I mean, that's exactly what it is. And it's 172 times more powerful an antioxidant than vitamin C. And vitamin D is supposed to be the prime thing that you take for it. And the reason why you take vitamin D is to strengthen your immune system because it is an antioxidant. So therefore, it must be around what, 172 times more powerful than vitamin D. I mean, I wish our class scientists were here, Chris. Maybe I'll ask them that question. But it's like, and C60 is used against AIDS. And we know that Dr. Fauci invented AIDS. You know, they developed HIV and they used $320 million to, I mean, once you get into the research, which we have, developing all of these legal papers that have gone down into the very dark corners of what's been behind this. C60 EVO is something that you want to, it's good for its civil defense. And we're not getting in trouble with the FDA. We're just those who have ears to hear and eyes to see might want to look into it more deeply. I'm not sure whether that answers your question. I've been dancing around. I could get into it much more deeply with a lot of technical jargon, but I'm not sure I would want to do that without Chris being here.
Well, I want to clarify, it's vitamin C, not vitamin D.
Oh, no, I understand that, but I was making the jump here. See, I am the guy that always, what I do is I always expand the circle.
Okay.
And it's 172 times more powerful than vitamin C, which is an antioxidant. Now, what you always hear is take vitamin D. For take vitamin C and take vitamin D for the little, but you take vitamin D in order to strengthen your immune system. And you strengthen your immune system because it's an antioxidant. So vitamin C is an antioxidant and vitamin D is an antioxidant. Well, if it's 172 times more powerful than vitamin C, how many times more powerful it is than vitamin D? Now, there isn't a study that's been cited, but it should be the same ballpark, right?
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that Chris is not here, but I'm going to ask him next time. I am always the guy that takes the box and expands it. That's my function.
We count on you. So the final,
anyway,
it's kind of a great education. I feel like this is the show that should be called Data about C60. And, I really quizzed Robert. And then after our conversation, I thought, I got to get you on the air. And it was really cute. Chris is like, nah, he doesn't really like to do that. And I said, I can get him. Come on, tickle, tickle. But, once he gets going, he's a master and he knows what he's talking about. So the last video that we're going to show and share is the explanation of the different processes that you can choose to do to make C60. And our lab has tried all of them. And they also speak to other labs claiming to do certain processes. And my partners are saying that's whatever. You'll hear them say it. But the one thing I also want to mention where the real scientists that have the HPLC machine in their lab, which is how we measure how much concentration is in this bottle. High performance liquid chromatography, HPLC. And it's not like a guessing game with the color where you put it in a glass tube and you go, oh, it's really purple. Well, that's good, thick enough, for coconut, and amber for the other olive oil, and avocados, a little edging on green. So they go with color, but it's not a real measurement. The high performance liquid chromatography machine is precise and accurate, and it can tell you that you're at 0.86% milligrams of C60. So what we learn in a real lab is that the 3 different oils that most of the people on the market are selling today have different levels of how much concentration the C60 will hold, no matter how long you mix it, no matter how well you mix it, and no matter how much C60 you put into the formula. So with maximum everything, we measured and tested, and ultimately olive oil holds more C60 than any other oil possible. It holds 0.8 to 0.86 milligrams per milliliter. Avocado oil holds 0.6 to 0.65, which is 2 points less. And coconut oil, which everybody's like, rave, it holds less than half what the olive oil holds. And if people knew that, they would probably only use it in their morning coffee, but go for olive oil during the day for that major boost. So here's olive oil at 0.8 to 0.85 milligrams per milliliters, and coconut MCT oil holds 0.3 to 0.35. That's less than half of what you'll get in the olive oil. Well, I keep watching Chris on the shows raving about the coconut oil, which tastes so good, in his morning coffee. So I started putting it in my morning silver bullet. What a difference. My days are better. So we have a sampler set where you can buy a sample of all 3 flavors in either 2-ounce or 4-ounce size. And then you can see, what resonates with you, because different people like a different level or frequency of energy. And the coconut oil is far more subtle, and the olive oil is definitely more energizing. The avocado oil is safe. It's right there in between, but safe is a silly word, because I know that I always want the maximum out of the supplemental products that I'm using. So this next video, our last one, is the greatest explanation of all the different processes of how people make C60 that you can find online today, and why we do the HPLC method.
Okay.
It's called the chromatography method. The other ones are sublimation and sonication.
Okay, here we go.
It's like having them here. Hello again. My name is Patty Roach. I'm one of the owners of C60 EVO with my partner, Chris Burres.
Hello.
And Robert Wong.
Hello.
You rarely see Robert because he's usually at the lab, but he is a very integral part of our processing. So I wanted to talk about the different ways that C60 can be manufactured around the world. And then you'll understand, what it is that you might want for your personal choice. The process that we're doing in our lab is a special one because we're purifying it to the point where we end up with not industrial grade C60 or varieties, but just pure ESS 60, carbon 60. Fabulous. So Robert, if you might explain the manufacturing process of how we do it in our lab to the audience.
Sure, I'll do it, Patty. I can't go into all the details, but it's based off the Huffman-Krashmir process, where you take a pair of graphite rods and you put it into the reactor under a certain condition, vaporizing the graphite rods. And so you break down the graphite into C2 chains. At some point in the reactor, those chains were coalesce and cool to form the spherical molecule, the carbon 60, carbon 70, 76, 78, 84, and so forth, and with all the other amorphous carbon. So after over period of time, that we call carbon fullerene soot, the raw material, that is captured and processed. And the next step is we take that fullerene soot, it goes into a chemical process where the fullerenes are dissolved in the chemical. And what we're left with is the pure dissolved fullerenes versus the amorphous carbon going through a filtration process. So now you have 100% fullerenes. It will consist of the carbon 60, carbon 70, 76, 84, and so on up the chain to higher fullerenes. And so from there, it gets a little more trickier, where we go to the characterization and separation of the individual families of fullerenes, carbon 60 versus carbon 70, and so forth down the road. And we do that through a HPLC chromatography process, and this is all still done in chemical. And we do the separation of that, and we isolate the pure fractions of carbon 60 and the pure fraction of carbon 70. That is separated out. Then from there is where we do our distillation, where the solvents is removed, which will leave the powder, or I say powder residue of carbon 60. From that point, it goes to many other processes to fully remove the solvents, and where we go to, we call it vacuum oven baking process. Sounds simple, but it's not as simple as everybody think it is. You don't go home and pop it in your oven and bake it. That's not gonna work. But that's one of the processes we use. And after that, a few more steps after that to get it to our highest purity, which is the ESS60, which is safer for human consumption, versus the industrial grade carbon 60, which we have clients buying it. And that will have residual solvents in it, because those particular clients will take it, redissolve it in different chemical, hexane, toluene, whatever they're using for it, carcinogenic stuff, so it's hazardous stuff, basically find your gasoline. And that's where they do their magic, where they do derivatizing, add other adducts to it to make their, say, solar cells, PCMBs, whatever their research project is. And so that's what they do. But we do our processing to clean up the carbon 60 to make ESS60, which is our pure C60 that's safe for human consumption.
Now, Chris, you said that some C60 is naturally occurring.
Yeah. So it's important to note, yes, it's naturally occurring. In fact, if you collect the soot from a candle flame, you usually do this by just holding a cold plate over that candle flame. You'll collect that black soot. That soot is comprised of parts per million, parts per billion of fullerenes, right? The whole gamut of fullerene, C60, C70, C76 on up. So it is a naturally occurring molecule. And then some people are like, oh, you made it in a reactor, and so therefore it is inherently different. The fact is that it doesn't matter whether it's out in space, because there's actually been a lot of carbon 60 identified in space, or whether it's collected from a candle, or whether it's collected from a reactor. A buckyball can only be a buckyball. It's got the exact 60 carbon atoms. It's got the exact number of carbon double bonds, the exact number of carbon single bonds. There literally is no difference. It's very much different than you think about synthetic hormones. And we know that there are slight differences in synthetic hormones from actual hormones, and those differences can have different impacts in the body. That is not true with a buckyball. That is not true with ESS60. It's the same molecule that you would collect from the soot in a candle.
Yeah, interesting fact, every once in a while we ship our product worldwide and stuff, and the custom department, or the technical department asks, can I get the formula for C60? Sure, C60. That's it. That's the formula. There's no formula. That is the molecule. And people think it's a formulation of something else, C60 plus something else. No, the formula is C60.
Now, the difference between pure ESS60 and the industrial grade that your customers buy around the world for tires and solar cells and other industrial processes, how can you explain the HPLC machine that we use to be sure with every batch that it is pure?
Sure. So HPLC stands for High Performance Liquid Chromatography. So basically, if you go back to maybe elementary school and you had a sunlight and little prism, and the light comes through and you see different color bands, it's somewhat similar to that, where the chemical what you're injecting into the system gets separated through a column, and the different UV light, but a wavelength hits the sample, and there's a way that the sample is absorbed the light beam, gives you a peak analysis of the material going through. And so by having a known standard, you can compare your sample going through in its purity, the absorption of the light that the carbon 60 will have, the absorption of the carbon 70 and the 76 and other molecules. And so the pure carbon 60 is a single peak that pops up, nothing else popping up. Now, if you have some other peaks popping up, that means you have C70 in it, and C76, which you can call as a contaminant. If you're selling pure carbon 60, any other peaks that's popping up, you can consider it a contaminant.
No, it's great. And I know that you test every batch of C60 EVO that goes out so that we don't have any C70s or other carbon products in our oil. It's just pure C60. So some companies promote that they do different processes than us. And can you explain why you don't choose to do this process, or if you think it's better or not as good? I'm just curious about the sublimation. Some people claim that that's how they make their products.
Sublimation will give you probably the purest form of carbon 60. It's just a different way to separate the C70, C76, and C84 from C60. So it's a way to separate the fractions. It's giving you the same C60. So it's just a purification process that you could use. We have done that in the past, and it's time-consuming, costly, and you will lose half your carbon 60. So basically, if you put, say you start with 10 grams of carbon 60 in the apparatus, and you vaporize it, and it goes down the tube to coalesce and reform again, half of that material can be lost due to the flow and the vacuum that you put it under. And so if you take that in consideration, that material you say costs you $10,000. It's a really high estimate. Now you only get half of it back. So now that $10,000 is worth $20,000 of material you have. And so you lost half the material. It's cost prohibitive. So anybody who is saying that they're using sublime C60 in a process and selling it the oil, that oil should cost a lot more, or they had no profit margin, which suggests that whoever they're buying the sublime C60 is not really sublime. And so there's no way to verify if somebody in Russia or China is really doing it. Somebody just stick a tag on it and say, hey, it's sublime. Oh, I'm buying sublime for the same price as the ES60. Well, not really, because 1 gram of our sublime material sells for like $1,000. Who buys it? Not the average person. Material science people buy it because they want the purest material for their research. So that's what sublime is. And I can go into more details how it actually works, but that's a lot of details.
So if they're promoting it as sublimated and it's the same price as ours or whatever, you don't believe that it's really sublimated, or they're just being really kind and not making any money?
Yeah, maybe they're kind, not going to make any money. But I really doubt that they really understand what they're buying, and they're just being, the wolves pulled over their face, is that right terminology? But they just want to, put a blind eye to it and say, hey, I bought Sublime. Really? So, we've been in business for 30 years. All the researchers around the world, all the universities around the world trust our product, and so the whole thing is, yeah,
That's a good one.
trust. Who are you gonna buy from? You trust somebody to buy from. Now, it's like buying gas for your car. You can buy from some little guy with a jug of gasoline on the side of the road, or you can buy from Exxon or Shell.
And I can speak to, there's really one group kind of promoting, maybe there's another one that I'm not aware of that's promoting that they're using a sublimated process. If that's in Robert's talking, hey, maybe they don't know how to test that material and don't know how to confirm that it's sublimated. I would argue that that's definitely true. In fact, if you look on some of the packaging on the market, they've actually done egregious scientific work and mixed English units with British units, right? So it's ounces and milliliters, or it's or grams, right? Ounces and grams don't go together. They're two totally different types of communication systems when it comes from a scientific perspective. Any legitimate scientist would never put that on their product. And then now, we're asked as consumers to trust them, and like, hey, you're getting sublimed, which, we have been working with it for 30 years. We're telling you that's at least double the cost. You get lost in the details and the confidence that you might or might not have in that organization.
Oh, yeah, we add that one little note to that. We have played with sublime, just trying to redissolve it in our chemicals. That sublime takes 3 or 4 times longer to get fully dissolved back into the chemical solvents. We have clients call us back up in the past. Hey, your carbon 60 is not going back to solvents. Look up the data. Okay, you bought the sublime material. It's going to take a couple of weeks for it to go back into toluene. Now you try to put it back in olive oil or MTC oil, it's going to take forever.
Yep. So you've got the additional cost of the sublimed product, and then the additional cost of mixing a sublimed product in an oil. And if you don't go through it for that extra period of time, you're actually delivering a significantly inferior product. Like the math just doesn't work.
Now, what is sonication? The other process that I've heard some people do.
Sonication. Well,
let me do a quick. Sonication is a way to make a vastly inferior product, but Robert can talk about the details.
Well, I mean, maybe the ladies, I use the ladies, but the people who buy jewelry, which is not me, but buy rings and stuff, you take your rings back to K Jewelry or your jewelry, and they clean it for you. They usually put it in a sonicator, which is ultra high vibrating device. Just some soap and water, and stick it in there and they vibrate it, and it cleans it. Micro cleans the debris off your ring and make it nice and bright and shiny. So that's what most sonication machines are used for. People are familiar with that. You can buy the cheap one, at the local hardware store. Some cheap piece of equipment made in China. But sonication is a process where it is the ultra high vibration of this liquid will cause microcavitation and a lot of disturbance. And so that's great for cleaning supplies, cleaning your tools, and things like that there. That's what sonication typically used to clean stuff. Now, people have watched things on YouTube and say, hey, I could do that. And so let's take our oil, put it in a beaker, let's stick our carbon 60 in it, and let's put it in a sonicator and start mixing it. It's a great mixing device. So then they mix it up in there, and voila, it's done in 2 hours. Depends on the volume.
2 hours instead of 3 weeks.
Yeah. So, but in the process of doing that, you will oxidize the oil, really oxidize the oil, heat the oil up, and give you a couple of examples. We bought samples, so everybody, that's out there trying to sell products, we do sonication every once in a while, do a quick test for our purposes. We don't sell sonicated products, but if you ever taste a sonicated oil, needless to say, carbon 60 or not, a sonicated oil will have this kind of metallic electrical taste in the background. The first time I tasted it, I had this flashback to my probably 8-year-old kid sitting in the room with my electric slot cars. I don't know if you remember that. Maybe I'm telling you how old I am. But the old electric slot cars, you had little metal tracks. You put your little car on top of it, and you squeeze the little trigger, and it shot around the track, making sparks and stuff. Or electric train set. That arcing smelled exactly like the oil I tasted. And that's what that backflash I had. Ooh, that tastes like my slot car. And so that sonication causes that metallic electrical smell in the oil, and that's just the oxidation in the flavor. I mean, I'm not gonna name companies who does that, but that's when we got our first sample, and whoa, man, that's terrible tasting. So if you taste that flavor, it's not from us. It's probably from somebody else you bought it, and our is mixed for 2, 3, sometimes 4 weeks. All depends on the process and the oil. We take it out and we analyze it, make sure it has met the proper solubility level of our ESS60.
Awesome. Well, that explains all the different ways that carbon-60 can be processed to be delivered to humans, but the HPLC machine that proves that you got pure C60 is probably going to be your safest. It's the only one that's guaranteed to be safe. The others might be a little questionable, but our lab, after 30 years, has certainly tried all of the different ways to manufacture and chosen the one that we believe works the best for all of you who want to consume it and share it with your pets. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
And our website is C60 EVO, like evolution.com.
Well, that was a very educational video. I think that takes a lot of the ignorance out of the equation. And I use ignorance not in an evil way. It's just that people don't know much about C60, and so it's a chance. And so these are kind of educational videos, which I think should be shared as the use of C60 spreads. It's a good thing.
Well, thank you for downloading them or uploading them and getting them ready to go, because I did spread them out as I posted them. But to see all 3 of them in one show today that can now be posted everywhere is going to teach people a lot about the process and the opportunity to understand really that there's not a connection between our C60 EVO and anything scary that people are worried about. So thank you for doing the clarifying. And we did mention our website is C60 EVO, like evolution.com. And if you use Alfred's code, which is EV, and then his 3 initials, ALW, when you check out, you'll save more money at the checkout. And the link below this video will show you a landing page with more information and ways to order. You can just tap it and pop right into the website. And with Alfred's code, like I said, there's different ways to save money, but that's your final at the checkout to save even more. So hopefully everybody learned a lot. I did by watching them again. And it was nice to bring both Chris and Robert in, because there's a lot of different people out there making C60, but there's only 2 scientists that have been doing it for 30 years. And those are my guys. And I'm really glad that they took the time to answer that many questions, because I learned a lot again today watching it. So,
this was like an historical documentary almost.
Yay. Well, how are you feeling on your ESS60? You take it every day still, yeah?
I do, yes. And I've come up with this slogan, which I repeat as my slogan, which is how C60 EVO helps me do wonders and stay safe. And I say do wonders because at least in my world, I never thought that I would be doing the wonders that I'm doing. I mean, in terms of accomplishing as much as I am, according to my own expectations, and staying safe in these times, and rendering a lot of public service. So it's a win-win for everybody.
It is indeed. 1 hour before you and I met to do this presentation, we did a testimonial recording with a customer that wrote us this really over-enthusiastic, fabulous testimonial about she and her partner, her husband, are really noticing it, but the pets, and she was just going down a list of her
Right.
dog and her cat. And so I invited her to go live with us, and she began and ended with, "I saw you on Alfred Lambermont Weber's show."
Oh, great.
And when she ended, she said, "I've been watching him a long time, and the difference in him is why I want to order the product."
Amazing.
So she said, "I've watched him, over the years." And she said, "He's brighter than ever now." So I just wanted to let you know that. And I'll send you the testimonial because she did
That's
rant about
absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we have the ability here, especially now, this is a ability with StreamYard that we use. We can take videos and we can play them like today. So in future shows, if you have things like that just send me either the link or the video and we can play it here.
Yeah, those were good. I loved getting Robert out of the lab. Did you
Yeah.
notice his desk? That's a real scientist. He just has like everywhere. Oh, he's so funny. When I went to visit them, they both had high desks full of stuff and things. Mine's getting a little high, gotta say, but at least it's tidy. So
Right.
thank you, and stay
Totally.
well.
Exactly. And don't go away because I want to plan our next show.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Okay.
everyone. Take care. And C60EVO.com. Alfred's code again is EVALW. Thank you.
Thank you.